All right, it's great to be with you. I flew in from Seattle, Washington, and I think there's probably more conservatives in this room than the entire city of Seattle. But I will say this as well. When I came in to check in and I saw the group of protesters outside, I saw a woman being escorted out, it made me feel right at home. Yeah, I'm Christopher Rufo. I'm a documentary filmmaker, a research fellow at the Discovery Institute in Seattle, and a contributing editor at City Journal at the Manhattan Institute. I've spent the past 13 years directing documentaries around the world for PBS, Netflix, and international television. I've traveled to some of the world's most remote places. I've followed Mongolian nomads, I've looked at the Muslim population of Central Asia, and I've observed countries like China, India, and Nigeria as they make this transition from poor to rich societies. But 5 years ago, because I got married and had kids and my wife wouldn't let me do that anymore, I wanted to make a film a little bit closer to home, and I wanted to answer a different question. What happens when societies and cities go from rich to poor? So I traveled through the Rust Belt, through the Deep South, and through the California interior, visiting cities that were once thriving, but are now some of the poorest places in America. I ended up following families in 3 of these cities, Youngstown, Ohio, Memphis, Tennessee, and Stockton, California, for 3 years. And I learned something profound. The crisis in these places, the crisis of the forgotten man, as Brooke talked about, is not just an economic crisis, it's a human crisis that shakes at the very foundations of how our society is built. But before I tell you more about the film, which is called America Lost, that's set to be released this fall, I'd like to show you the 2-minute trailer for the project to give you a sense of the story. And this is actually the first time the trailer has been shown publicly. It hasn't been released yet, and I'm honored and proud to be able to share it with you before everyone else. So let's roll the clip.
I hate to say it, the neighborhood I grew up in, which was once beautiful, it's a ghetto now. Seems like poverty is kind of like a really mean disease. It just kind of slowly creeps and consumes, and it's just spreading.
Everybody has a story. It could be through drugs, it could be through abuse, it could be through violence. And our families are broken down, our communities are broken down, people's lives are broken down, they're devastated.
This is the story of 3 forgotten American cities. I spent 5 years exploring this lost American interior. I thought I'd be telling an economic story, but over time I discovered there's a deeper human crisis.
My dad is in jail in Texas right now, and he's been there for about 2 years. Somebody that you really love goes away. It's like a piece of your heart missing.
Man, it's really hit home for me, man. You know what I'm saying? I tell people all the time, man, that man, my mama raised 3 boys, man. Man, and both of my brothers were killed, man. And man, my brothers were my friends, man.
If I didn't have a family, I wouldn't be alive right now. The only thing that keeps my heart beating, the only thing that keeps my old heart from giving up on me is knowing that I have a reason why to keep breathing in and out and moving forward.
Bring peace to this neighborhood. Bring salvation to this neighborhood.
Change starts with us. If we can affect a person, we can affect the community, we can affect the city, we can affect the world.
You know, and here's an important thing to remember. The cities in this film, while they tell a dramatic story, are actually not the exception. They represent thousands of struggling neighborhoods, towns, and cities across the United States that are confronting the problems of economic stagnation, family breakdown, and the collapse of community institutions. The purpose of this film is to honestly confront these challenges that are facing poor American communities. I showed that despite now spending more than $1 trillion a year on federal and state anti-poverty programs, communities like these are still struggling with these problems. If you grow up in a zip code like 38126 in Memphis, which has 6,000 total residents, but only 10 nuclear families, it's incredibly difficult to make your way through the world. But don't worry, this is also a story of hope. Although the situation in these cities can seem bleak, I've also seen tremendous potential for change. I've seen a man coming out of prison at 38 years old and finding a job for the first time in his life. I've seen families ripped apart by addiction, incarceration, and betrayal get restored. And I've seen communities come together at that neighborhood level to fight against violence, death, and destruction. And after 5 years of walking with the forgotten men and women in these communities, I've learned that the most important thing that all of us can do right now is change the metaphor in how we think about poverty. For the past 50 years, we've focused on top-down solutions, creating new programs and believing that we can solve these problems with mathematical precision. But I've seen that real change doesn't happen from the top down, it happens from the inside out. It starts within each individual and slowly extends outward to families, neighborhoods, and communities. If poverty is truly a human crisis, it requires a truly human solution, and I think we saw that with our last speaker. And this is where you come in. I'd like for you all to take a second to think about your own community, your own state, and to think about some of the places that are dealing with these same challenges. And I'd like to take a show of hands, and I'm optimistic they'll all go up. How many of you might be interested in watching the whole film and sharing it with people in your neighborhood and community? All right, I kind of forced you to, but I'm glad you raised your hand. So here's the good news. I've been working with ALEC and Lisa and Michael Bowman to make the film available to you to share with your community for free. The film, America Lost, is currently set for a release this fall and will eventually broadcast on PBS, iTunes, Amazon, and Netflix. But for the first part of the distribution campaign, I'm hoping to recruit 1,000 policymakers, scholars, and community leaders to host screenings of the film across this country and show that conservative solutions on poverty work. I actually was yelling at my editor to get the trailer ready in time for this, so really glad to be here. But in the next few months, I'm going to be reaching out to you through ALEC to provide you with a link to the film, a link to a discussion guide, a link to the marketing materials, to give you everything you need to share this with your team, with your office, with your community, with different groups that might be interested in spreading this positive message of uplifting American communities from the inside out. And lastly, I wanted to let you know I'm also raising support. So if there's anyone in this audience that would be interested in working together to get this message out, please come see me in the lobby after lunch. It's an important story, and I'm just so inspired by Brooke's message, by Matthew's message, by the message that I'm hearing from all of you, that change is possible, hope is an inevitability if we all work together to make a difference. Thank you so much. It's grateful to be here, and I wish you the best work in all of your work in your communities at home. Thank you.